Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of The Island Lamb. For those of you who tuned in to episode 1, thank you. And for those of you who are just tuning in for the first time, my name is Diane, and I live on a small island off the southern coast of Rhode Island in the northeast of the US. And we are having what we call on the island a shore day. And a shore day means the ferries aren't running. And we had a shore day yesterday, today, probably tomorrow, and probably Wednesday, and all due to the remnants of Hurricane Ian. And we have 7 to 9 foot seas, and I know in the scheme of things, and all those folks in Florida who are suffering, that is nothing. And our hearts and our thoughts and prayers go out to those folks in Florida. But due to it being a shore day and a stormy gray day, it's a perfect day to knit, and again, a perfect day to talk to you about knitting. And I wanted to mention 2 podcasters who I discovered this week and who entertained me all week long. And the first one is Devin of Knitty McPurley. And I caught her episode 94, a tribute to Queen Elizabeth II. And I enjoyed that podcast so much. She did some research into the history of the Argyll sweater and the region of Argyll and Scotland, and how the abdicated King Edward actually brought the Argyll and the Fair Isle fashion forward. So it was really an interesting podcast. Also, because of her, I found out about the Republic of Me. Fascinating, beautifully photographed, gorgeous podcast. The artist is Ivana, and she lives on the island of Cyprus in the Mediterranean. So it was just fascinating to see some of the things she makes. She's a painter, fabulous paint oils. She's a knitter, spinner, weaver, gardener. So I do say if you get a chance, I would check those 2 podcasts out. And a thanks to Devin, who encouraged me and said I could do this podcast. So thank you, Devin. Okay, let's talk about what I'm wearing. So in my last episode, I said I had made several of the half and half triangle shawl by Pearl Soho, and I used the Linen Quill yarn. And this is the one I showed you last week, which was the Oatmeal and Navy. And I also made one in the Antique Celadon and the Jade. And as I mentioned, I had a lot of yarn left over. And I decided to make andreamowry stone crop cardigan with that leftover yarn. So the base, or the main color, is the Oatmeal Gray, which is this color here. I did have to purchase another skein, but I had enough with the leftover skein and the extra skein, and I used the Jade, and I used that beautiful Antique Celadon. Now the pattern calls for variegated yarn, and I believe it's the spin cycle yarn. And it would have made it a lot easier, because you really would have just been dealing with the main color, and then one color would have created all the variegation. But I wanted to use the Linen Quill, and I'm telling you, I love this. It feels good in shawl, it feels good in sweater. I did block it. I can tell the difference. I'm going to block these. I can tell the difference. It's even softer. Now this pattern was interesting because you did these bobbles with a crochet hook. Now I've made bobbles a lot of different ways, and this is the first time I used a crochet hook, and I had to watch the tutorial, and I almost said, never mind, I'm going to use my tried and true method, but I persevered, and I'm glad I did it. It was an interesting way to do it. So for those of you who've been making bobbles with crochet hooks all along, hats off to you. It's quite a technique. The other thing I did is I just cast on for the stitches I needed for the pattern, and after I knew I had the length I wanted, and I decided where I wanted how I wanted the neck to fit, I picked up stitches, and I did about a 1/2 inch of a 1x1 rib, and I bound off using Jenny's Stretchy Bind Off method, which I love. I did use the tubular cast off method on the sleeve and on the hem. Very, very pleased with this pattern. If you haven't knit an andreamowry pattern before, I highly recommend it. The level of detail, the attached tutorials will guide you right through. So speaking of andreamowry patterns, and any of you who have been watching me Instagram or on Facebook, and by the way, on Instagram, I'm the Island Lamb, and I'm the Island Lamb on Ravelry as well. And I did spend some time this week trying to clean up my Ravelry account so that it'd be easier for you to access some of this information if you want. So speaking of andreamowry, and if you've been following me, you know that I have been working on the Spark Cardigan. This is a work of art. This pattern is incredible. So it is once again, it's a 2-color. You buy a main color, and the pattern called for a variegated yarn. And I decided to use Cascade 220 in Atlantic. This is the colorway Atlantic, and Cascade 220 Superwash Wave in this beautiful pinky red. And so I started with the sleeves. It's got a beautiful long cuff. So I started with the sleeves. You get acquainted with the pattern. This part of the sleeve and this part of the main body is so simple. Every other row is just the main color. You're following a very small chart once you get up here. And then you work the body in the round, and you're going to steek. You're going to cut up the middle. It has a shawl collar, which I'm working on right now. And my goal is to get the nerve to cut this. I've never done a steek before. And I was all ready to just go for it. And then I started watching some tutorials and reading, and I made the color work in a superwash yarn. Not a great choice for cutting your yarn. It's a slippery yarn, slippery material. So I was gonna just steek it with I was just gonna reinforce it with my sewing machine, which I haven't used in about 20 years, and that made me nervous in itself. And I'm a sewist. I've sewed. I just haven't sewed in the last 20 years. So I decided to use the crochet reinforcement method, and I did that on each side. And then I made a swatch and did that with the swatch and cut it, and I wasn't comfortable with the way the superwash was acting. So then I did a back stitch by hand. And then I just decided to go ahead and pick up the stitches and work the shawl collar. And then I procrastinated further, and I made the very long belt. I had belt loops I could make next, but eventually I'm gonna have to cut this. So my goal is to finish the shawl collar, make another swatch, run it up and down my machine, try to get the right tension, do a zigzag stitch on each side, which is what a lot of you have done, and just cut it. So stay tuned for that. So I thought I would just show you one of my finished objects. This is a beautiful pattern. This is an older pattern. This pattern has probably been out for, I don't know, 50 plus years. It's by Candide. If any of you remember Candide yarn, I'll show you the picture. Hopefully my camera can pick up that sepia color. I have made this in a pullover for my sister-in-law. I've made this in a cardigan a couple of times and actually sold them. And every time I've made it, and it's been I felt it was a little small for me. So I decided to make this for me. And I ordered my beautiful leather buttons from England, and it's just too big. It's too big for me. So I've been wearing it around the house and trying to decide what I should do about it. I have a big wide leather belt with a big buckle, and I thought maybe I'll just wrap it and put the belt on and wear it with skinny jeans. So but I did want to say to you, if you want to make a beautiful fisherman knit, I would recommend this pattern. And it has, I think this is called the Wave of Honey. And this is the wheat pattern. And this is the bobble cable pattern. It looks really complicated, but once you get into the pattern, it's very repetitive and it's very intuitive. So the Wave of Honey pattern repeats every 4 rows, so that's easy. You don't even really have to think about that once you get the hang of it. The wheat pattern, I believe, repeats every 8 rows, so same thing, you can start to see it. And the diamond pattern, you got to keep your eye on it. It is knit in pieces, so you are going to have to put it together. There's a lot of opportunity for sizing and shaping because you've got the seed stitch on each side. So, and this is in Cascade 220, if I didn't say that, in the denim blue, a real workhorse of a yarn. That's why I thought I would make my Spark Cardigan out of it, except I wasn't thinking about the superwash. So anyway, I wanted to share that with you. What do I have on the needles? Well, so I have to tell you a quick funny story about my husband. And you know, he's been following my progress with knitting for years. And I think the Spark Cardigan got his attention too, because he said, you're gonna cut up the middle of that sweater. And I said, I am, because I had all that confidence in the beginning. And then I got scared, and then I made the belt. And then I made my brother a pair of socks. And then I finished 2 sweaters, the Spark Card, the Stone Crop. And then I put a poncho on the needles, and my husband said to me, so when are you having your root canal? You know, before you're gonna cut that sweater, what else do you have in mind? But anyway, while I'm procrastinating, I am making this gorgeous poncho. So this, I have made this many, many times. I've made this for friends and family, and I've sold them, but I never made one for myself. So I had this beautiful Baby Alpaca Grande yarn by Plymouth Yarn. It is heaven on earth. It is the softest, most beautiful yarn. It will shed a little bit, so if you decide to make this, keep that in mind. I've made it in black, and it's going to be on your white jeans. If you make it in white, it's going to be on your black jeans. But if you wear jeans, regular denim jeans, you won't have a problem with it. I find it doesn't get in my eyes or in my mouth when I'm knitting it or when I'm trying it on. So it's, you start at the top and you cast on, you know, 60 stitches, and you're basically ribbing, and then you increase on each side of the cable every other row. So you're increasing 4 stitches every other row. So it starts fast, and then it gets bigger and bigger, and you are going to end up with about 10 cables. The cables are on the front and the back. And this pattern is from a cute little book called Viva Ponchos. And it's still available on Amazon. I know that because my cousin Catherine, who I'm going to Rhinebeck with, bought the pattern and also made herself one of these ponchos in off-white. I know not everybody loves a poncho. You know, what do you do with your arms? Where do you put your purse? But, you know, if you're walking through town, you're going out for a little coffee or a little lunch in October, I think it's a really, really fun pattern. So that's what I'm working on. And I told you last time I'm thinking about a few things, going to Rhinebeck. But the big thing I'm thinking about right now is we are coming up on the Stephen West Mystery Knit-Along, the MCAL. And for those of you who've been following me on Instagram and on Facebook, you've seen my color choices, but I'm going to show you again because I finally caked them up yesterday. So this is a gorgeous amethyst color. And I don't usually wear this color, which is kind of interesting because I'm born in February and I'm an Aquarius. And my birthstone is amethyst. And I really didn't know a whole lot about the stone because I don't have any. And I realized it's really a very powerful stone. It's a crystal, and it wards off, wards off bad things, but it's supposed to be a very powerful, strong stone. So I think that's really a gorgeous, rich color. And I'm pairing it with, and I'll tell you what the yarn is in a second. I'm pairing it with this beautiful variegated hand-dyed. It has every once in a while a little splotch of orange and a deep purple, and mostly this lavender peachy. And to settle that down a little bit, I'm just using this very pretty creamy color. So the amethyst and the cream, this is coming from a company called Farmer's Daughter Fibers. 1952 is the brand, brand. And I'm using Natural and, let's see, what is the color of this purple? The amethyst is the colorway, let's just give you a second here, I have it. The colorway is Sinopah, S-I-N-O-P-A-H. And that's the amethyst and the cream. This variegated yarn is a different company. This is from Life in the Long Grass. And the packaging on this says, ethnically sourced yarn, recycled paper and packaging, colors inspired by nature, hand-dyed in a studio in the Irish countryside. Oh, so that's for the Stephen West Mystery Knit-Along, which begins in 3 days on October 6th. So I don't know how many of you are going to be participating, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So I think I mentioned in my first episode that I had bought 3 different colors, and I ordered them through Stephen and Penelope, that's Stephen West's yarn company in Amsterdam. And if you did that, you were to get this little goodie bag, and but the yarn wasn't available, so I had to cancel that order. And they sent me the goodie bag anyway and still thanked me for participating. And there's a little cute needle checker, I guess, and a little label and some little hologram stuff. So I think that's going to be a lot of fun participating in that. And I think that's all I have for today. So thank you for joining me for my second episode. And I think I mentioned that if you look for me on Ravelry, I'm the Island Lamb. And I'm the Island Lamb on Instagram, and I'm the Island Lamb on YouTube. And I will probably, the next time I podcast, it's probably going to be after Rhinebeck. And I hope I have quite a bit of footage from that. So stay tuned and happy October. Bye-bye.